from the high chair.
So, hello everyone. So lovely to be in LA and to be here with Jarett, who's an old friend of mine. Yes. I'm supposed to read a little bit from this book first, and then Jarett and I will talk, which we've done quite a lot.
Yes.
So hopefully that will work out fine. Minna, this So Much for That Winter is two novellas, Minna Needs Rehearsal Space, and a novella called Days. And actually Days was written first back in 2008 and published in 2010. And Minna Needs Rehearsal Space is from 2013. We decided to put them together in this story about women who are on the brink of invisibility. They're both very formally interesting because they're playing with the format and also playing with modern communication. The first of the stories in this book is written entirely in one-liners and headlines, an idea that we can talk about where I picked up from because it has something to do with the internet, which he knows a lot about. I saw that. And the other one, I can tell you a little bit about that when we get to it. Actually, can I stand up and read? Because that's easier. How do you... Because I will be sliding down. It's easy. I'm used to standing up. And I'll sit down when we talk. This is perfect. So I'll read from this Minna Needs Rehearsal Space first, which is only headlines. And the main character, Minna, is a composer, and she's over 40, not much over 40, and she's also a typical host species. She's the kind of person who lets other people put their teeth in her throat and then drink her blood, and it's draining her, and she's lost her voice, and she's not doing well. She has a crush on a dude called Lars, and she has a big love for Ingmar Bergman, the Swedish cinematographer, who is of course dead, but that doesn't stop her from loving him tremendously. I'll read from the beginning, and then you can hear this strange rhythm that the one-liner makes, and also because the lines are so short, I noticed when I performed with it in Denmark in the beginning that I sometimes forget to breathe between the lines, and they're stacked on top of each other. So if anyone has an oxygen mask, thank you. We'll try it out. Minna introduces herself. Minna is on Facebook. Minna isn't a day over 40. Minna is a composer. Minna can play 4 instruments. Minna has lost her rehearsal space. Minna lives in Amma. Minna spends her days in the Royal Library. Minna has to work without noise. Minna is working on a paper sonata. The paper sonata consists of tonal rows. Minna writes soundless music. Minna is a tad avant-garde. Minna has a tough time explaining the idea to people. Minna wants to have sound with the music. No. Minna just wants to have sound. Minna wants to have Lars. Minna's in love with Lars. Lars used to really like Minna. Minna doesn't dare launch the relationship app. Lars has a full beard. Lars has light-colored curls. Lars works for the paper. Lars is a network person. Lars is Lars, Minna thinks, fumbling with the duvet cover. It's morning. Lars has left again. Lars is always in a hurry to get out of bed. The bed is a snug nest. Minna's lying in it, but Lars is on his bike and gone. Lars bikes as hard as he can in the direction of City Hall Square. Lars makes the pigeons rise. Lars has deadlines. Minna has an itch on her face. Minna goes out to the bathroom to check. Lars has kissed her. Minna doesn't look like who she looked like when she made the spaghetti last night. Minna looks like someone who drank all the wine herself. Minna walks around in bare feet. The apartment is full of notes. Bach stands in the window. Brahms stands on the coffee table. The apartment's too small for a piano, but a woman should have room for a flute. A woman should have room for a flute, a triangle, and a guitar. Minna takes out the guitar. Minna plays something baroque. Minna plays as quietly as possible. The neighbor bangs on the wall with his sandals. Minna needs a rehearsal space. Minna needs security in her existence. Minna misses the volume. Minna misses a healthier alternative. Minna wants to devote herself to ecology. Minna wants to involve a kid in it. Minna wants to try to be just like the rest. Lars ought to help her, but Lars uses condoms. Lars is on his bike and gone. Lars is Lars. And I will spare you of the passage where Lars breaks up in a text message. It's not pretty. It doesn't get any prettier when he also blocks her on Facebook, unfriends her, deletes her. It's not nice. She has to go to bed for 3 days with Ingmar Bergman, and he is dead. So it is, of course, a book that she goes to bed with. And she stays there for 3 days, and then she has to get up. We all do at one point. And in the excerpt I will read, the last excerpt from Minna, in this rehearsal space, she's biking. And she's biking through Copenhagen. And in Copenhagen, everyone is biking. It's like Amsterdam and Copenhagen. These are the cities of bikes. And the one thing that Danes are really good at is biking and texting at the same time. Sometimes kills one of us, but who cares? It's a talent we got. And Minna is on her bike through a hot Copenhagen, and she's texting, and the person she's texting with is her sister Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is one of the ticks in her life. She's a little vampire that has sucked onto Minna and is drinking all the energy out of her and taking her voice and her independence and constantly trying to direct her into the right way of living. And Minna is pretty tired of it, but she hasn't said no yet. And in this excerpt, you'll understand why she's so horrible, Elizabeth. Paper sonatas don't write themselves. Minna bikes to the Royal Library. The city's blazing hot from the sun. The cells blazing hot from messages. Elizabeth's after her. Elizabeth's 10 years older than Minna. Elizabeth's married to a successful optician. Elizabeth lives in a very nice neighborhood. The optician's skinny and dry. Minna understands him. The optician's a guest in his own home. Guests have it rough at Elizabeth's. Shoes have to be taken off in the hall. Shoes must never cross the threshold. The guest has to pee. The guest really has to pee. The John lies on the far side of the utility room. The shoes have to be removed anyway. The shoes have to be put on and taken off without leaning on the walls. The walls in the hallway must not get any grimy spots. The bench in the hallway must not have any buttons upon it. The bench is not to sit on. The bench is there to create harmony in the hallway. The guest is barefoot and entering a house full of rules. Elizabeth makes the rules. No one else has permission to make rules in the house. Cutlery must not clink against the service. The table must not be wiped with a wet rag. Book must be bound in dust jackets. Fingers must not touch the pictures. The coffee mugs must not stand without coasters underneath. The coffee mugs must not contain coffee. Coffee is forbidden at Elizabeth's. Everyone must drink tea. The optician gets the trots from tea, but the optician must remove his shoes before he runs out to the John. The optician struggles with his suede shoe in the hallway. The optician is afraid to place his fingers anywhere. The optician just reaches the toilet in his stocking feet. The shit runs out of him like green tea. Elizabeth shouts, "Is that you, honey?" The shit runs and runs. The optician considers whether he dares to shit anymore. Elizabeth shouts, "Is that you who came home, honey?" The optician reaches for the toilet paper. The optician remembers to tear it off in a straight line. The optician is lonesome, completely without allies. Elizabeth and the optician have neither dog nor kids. It's sad, but one thing is certain. Kids set their buttons everywhere. So it's obvious that Minna has to flee the scene. And she does, because Minna's rehearsal space is, among other things, a story about getting your voice back and refusing to tone it down. And also a mermaid story, and when you're from Denmark, you can't write about mermaids without visiting Hans Christian Andersen. And what happened in that story was a woman who, because she loved a man, gave away her voice. She sacrificed her own voice to live on ground and get him. And this is what Minna has done. And now, in the middle of her life, she wants her voice back. She wants to have the trade reversed. And you'll have to read that yourself, because for the last thing I'll read for you is from the other story, which is called Days. And Days was also written a little bit on the internet, because back in 2007-8, I had a heartbreak, and we all know that what writers feel pours into their writing sometimes. And I had this project that I would, for 100 days, every day, every night at 7 o'clock, I would sit down, I would write a list. I was not supposed to spend more than an hour doing it, and then I just send it off into the world on a blog. That blog very quickly got a lot of readers, and I did that for 100 days, and it was during a summer where Copenhagen was incredibly beautiful. And then when the 100 days were done and I was completely exhausted, I went to a residency where I met Jarett Kobek. Not that year, not that year. No, that's many years ago. But the same place, the same residency. And I cooked up these 100 lists into 39 lists and turned them into an independent story that is remote from my own, but which lends and borrows a lot of stuff from my own experience that summer. And therefore, this story is also more intimate to read for me. But I'll read two lists, not from the beginning of the book, but just two lists that I really appreciate to read, and which I think circles around some of the themes that I enjoy in this story. And let me see if I can find them. Awoke, walked barefoot across the floor, and ate a bit of bread, took a scrap of paper from the desk and wrote, "A red elephant is still an elephant" on it, and grew anxious about whether that sort of thing was good enough, felt stupid, felt wan. Was myself like an elephant that lurches around and knocks things over, but an elephant among broken glass is still an elephant? Just as a person who isn't up to snuff is still a person, and the Brooklyn movie theater is still a movie theater, and the grieving heart is still a heart, and a red elephant is still an elephant. Took the bike to Damhus Pond, and it was when I had to break by the bird-feeding area that I thought of my taxes and then my accountant, and then I biked home to my receipts, crunched the numbers, and this is a condition, I wrote at the bottom of a heating bill. This is a way of being, a change in the structure of existence, like the lull of rainy Sunday mornings, like trampled sneakers and slightly sour cartons of cream, and birds on the ground that eat from your hand and shit in place rather than flying. And birds ought to fly. A bird that doesn't fly is no longer a bird. Slept as if someone shook me to see if I were awake. Went to the pharmacy where the woman with globular breasts took all the headache pill variants down and explained the differences, and her breasts get bigger and bigger every time I go because she wants to tell me what camphor does to the mucous membranes, even though I'm buying earplugs. And I have to look at the inhaler even though I'm asking for Band-Aids. And I'm certain that these breasts the size of floating dry docks started out as ping pong balls before behavior made them grow. Walked home slowly, lay on the bed, and let 1 hour's sleep turn into 3, entangled in the bedspread like a swaddled babe. Woke, put my socks in the drawer, told myself the story of when I met the crown prince, again and again. Told it so many times that it got pathetic, whereupon several wounds sprung leaks. Made pasta bolognese, and went for a walk through a world that, to rub salt in my wounds, had turned itself the wrong side out and revealed all its inner beauty, all that fertility in the air, all that weeping in wait. And I'd taken the long way just to see if the elephants in Frederiksberg Gardens had lain down for the night, and the only ones left were the wood pigeons who sat in the grass. It might have been otherwise, I thought, and looked up at the door that now and then stood ajar to the world, sometimes merely so I could poke its finger in my face, and yet other times I catch a glimpse within, as of a whale rising up from the sea, with its tiny good clear eye peering at me, infinitely mild, and inquiring after its long journey from the bottom. Are you okay? Not completely, no. For all that I'd originally asked for was a cup of coffee. And now look at all this. Thanks.
Let's see. Well, thank you for that. God, this is loud. Anyway, before we start to talk about the work, I thought I would say I had read this article. I think someone just came out with a nonfiction book about the role that luck plays in people's lives, and having just had some success with this book. I think actually the focus of the book is that people who have success often don't like to talk about the luck that brings them to that success. And having read that article and having been in the middle of what's been something like a maelstrom of success, I started to think about, well, what are places where I actually had a lot of luck that led to this success? And one of the places that I think that really, really happened was actually in meeting you. And
thank you.
There's multiple reasons for that.
I was lucky when we met.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, that when I met Dorthe, it was at a residency in Denmark, which is a very strange thing. You go to an old manor house in the middle of a park, like a public, state-owned park.
Almost a national park.
A national park, the welfare state in action. And the manor house is owned by the Danish state, and the residency and the manor house are administered by this extraordinarily bizarre couple. And then... Yes. You were there when I got there, and you were, like 3 months away from becoming an international superstar.
Yeah, and little did I know.
And you had no idea this was about to happen to you. But it did give me a model to work off, watching you go through this success, which you really hadn't orchestrated for yourself so much as Graywolf had put together, but I was sort of merciless in stealing from this and figuring it out. But I also thought that one of the places where I was extraordinarily lucky in meeting you was you and I had gotten along extraordinarily well, and then there's always this terrible thing that happens when you meet writers and you really like them, which is you eventually have to read their work. And I cannot think of something that would have been more catastrophic than meeting someone that you really like and who you really respect and admire, and then having to read their work, and their work is terrible. And your work isn't. Your work is extraordinarily good. So it was a real relief. It was like, oh, God, I don't have to lie. Because I just envisioned years of being like, no, your work's really good. Yeah. and then just sort of lying about it, which does sort of get us to this place of talking about your work. And one of the things, can I just grab this? One of the things that I thought I would show for people who haven't read the book is that when you're reading it...
There are posters in it.
Oh, yeah, there are also notes.
Yeah, notes.
But when you see the work on the page, it's very different than how you just read it, which is, so this is from Minna, and you can see that each paragraph is at most 15 words. And then simultaneously, well, not simultaneously, but also with days, these are in numbered lists. And so this was done in 2007, right? Days?
I wrote it in 2008, I think.
2008,
Old
I'm sorry.
Books.
But it's sort of interesting because it's very prescient of what would then become the dominant method of communication on the internet for a couple of years, which were just these idiotic lists. And then Minna in particular, and I think you can speak to this more than I can, is directly influenced by Facebook, right?
Definitely, because actually Minna started out as sort of morose poems against the internet, because I thought it was so incredibly stupid that we were supposed to express ourselves in there with such short sentences. And back in the old days, Facebook would also force us into have our own name in the beginning of everything. And I sort of rejected that. I hated that. So I wrote these morose, satirical, hateful poems that was never supposed to be posted anywhere. They were just lying on my desk as something I enjoyed at night when I was feeling hate for the internet. And then suddenly I found out two things. One, that this alter ego, or this character Minna, was really, really fun working with, and that I could use her for many different things, but also that it was a lovely game to play with myself. There was some sort of really, really nerdy linguistic thing going on there. And also I thought, is it at all possible to write a complex story, a deep, complex story with many angles on modern life using only headlines?
Right.
But this is also the language of the news media, and it's like we...
Right, and you've spoken to this idea that now everything speaks in headlines, right? That it's just coming from everything.
Everywhere. And also, it's very, very fun for a writer to toy with this idea that everything should be nailed down to headlines, but if we look at politics and journalism and everything else, it's pretty scary that it should be, boiled down to one-liners all the time. So what works well in the lap of a writer is probably not so good in the White House. I'm just telling you.
And so this is very much in a different tradition than the Scandinavian literature that we seem to be awash in the U.S. right now.
Which is what?
Names that I wouldn't dare to try to pronounce. But, there is very much two models right now. There's crime fiction, which is a very peculiar genre. The Scandinavian crime novel is like secular humanists reaffirming original sin.
No, they're just perverse.
Well, either or.
They turned into perverse.
And then there's also huge multi-volume books about the minutiae of people's lives. And those seem very popular.
You mean a Karl Ove's?
Yeah, so that would be a name.
That would be one of them.
That would be a name I wouldn't dare to pronounce. But you are writing in a very different style, and that's a tradition. Or is it?
Yes, I would say that I write minimalistic, in Danish minimalism, but Danish minimalism is quite often not filled with the kind of compression that I put into my stories. It's like in my minimalist style, there is a lot of stuff always fighting to get out of the form. And this I took from the Swedes, because I studied Swedish literature at university, and I loved the big Swedes. I loved their existentialism and their courage to look at existence and life as it was. They're not very funny, however. I mean, you don't get a good sense of humor from staring into the dark every winter with your eyes wide open. But the Danish language has some sort of aesthetic vitality in it that comes from lack of words. I mean, the English language has about 500,000 words, and the Danish language has half that amount. So when English people speak, they always try to find the right word to express exactly what is said. In Denmark, we have perhaps 4 words meaning the same thing, and we have to find the right context instead. So it's an incredibly playful language. It's like playing with Lego. Only in Denmark could Lego be invented, and it comes from the language because the language sort of works that way. We invent words all the time. The Swedes hate that, by the way. I once told that to a Swedish movie director that the Danes played with language like that, and that I envied the Swedes for having such a classical and beautiful language. But in Denmark we played, and he said, "Well, you stop doing that." immediately. So they think we're naughty. We are. But
now, did you, I can't remember, did you meet Bergman or did you just go to his house?
I just slept in his daughter's bed. The daughter wasn't there. No, I spent some time on Gothland, where he lived on a small island called Foy, north of that. And while I was writing Minna Needs Rehearsal Space, it was a complete coincidence. I had just finished that book and then went to this place. And everywhere I went, I would run into people who were either related to Bergman or sleep in his daughter's bed. I don't want to tell that story how I ended up there, but no, it was a residency where she also stayed.
I see, so he's he's not just a huge figure in this book. He's a huge figure in most of your recent work, right? I mean, you've been engaging with him. And his
I wish. Yes, I would say that. I came across his memoirs called La Terna Magica. I'm actually not that much into his films, but he was an incredibly good writer. He was. I mean, if you take Strindberg, the big playwright of Sweden, he would definitely have been a movie director if the movie had been invented, so he's such a good writer, Ingmar Bergman, and his memoirs should be read by everyone who's working in art, because he's ruthless and blunt and very, very smart on what it means to be a creative and what it takes to be creative. So I try to read that book once a year. It's my Bible. But I've had many Bibles during my writing life. Don't you feel that, you don't stick to one guru? You do throw them away when you're done with them? That's what I do. So
what's it like being a writer in Denmark? I should admit, I actually know the answer to this because I have spent some time around them. But I find the Danish writers and Danish literary scene to be endlessly fascinating, and it's.
I want to hear your take on what you think.
Well, when a thing that I put in I Hate the Internet, which was we were just talking about, was very misinterpreted by at least one Danish writer. When I went and stayed in this farmhouse, this farmhouse is a little bit like you've decided to go onto the set of a horror film, because there's at any given time about 12 people living in it, and you're completely isolated and no one has a car. And in one way it's really amazing because you abscond from capitalism, but on the other hand someone could just kill you and kill everyone in it. And
that's the American thinking.
Right.
I mean,
and
we have gun control.
You do get extraordinarily strange people staying with you, and it was very clear at the time that all of the women were very serious about their work and very interested in what they were doing, and all clearly doing interesting things, and the men by and large were extraordinarily pompous and terrible. And actually, do you remember that one of them shaved his pubic hair and left it?
I remember the one who shaved his pubic hair.
Yeah,
I remember. Who can forget?
Well, he left it in the toilet and
he was just marking his territory
and didn't flush. And then I had to go and grab Dorthe and be like, it wasn't me, because I was the only other person who wasn't incredibly fair, right? So
just say it, spill the bean. You were panicking. You were
yeah. But the impression that I have received, and I could be, or I've formed, then I could be wrong, is that there is a hierarchy of culture there in terms of the literary arts that's just incomprehensible. Like, there's a hierarchy here, but it's not state-funded, and it's really diffuse. Whereas there you have one academy, right? And it seems to produce extraordinarily pompous people. And then you're quite on the outside of that, right?
Yeah, I'm not part of that. But you're right. There is one academy, and it produces 6 students a year, and they're sort of in there with the former former students of that school are now the teachers. That's a bad loop. I mean, and it's been going on for 25 years, feeding the same shit, just going through generations. But they're a very, very talented writer when they get in there, and there are many of them pretty frustrated when they come out of it, and but also very powerful, because they're the only academy that there is, and there are 5 million Danes.
Right.
I mean, that's not even a street in Los Angeles, right? It's like, I mean, it's such a tiny, tiny country and a tiny, tiny language. And actually, I would say that we're not even a language or a country, we're a tribe.
Right.
And all the literary communities I've met in the world are pretty strange. But the smaller they get, the worse they get. I mean, because everybody's been married to everyone, everybody has kids with everyone, everybody's sleeping with each other's wives. I mean, it's just completely claustrophobic.
Right.
And I've stayed away from it, also because I come from a different part of Denmark than this. But at this residency, we all come together. And this is actually the only place in Denmark where we coexist.
Right.
Otherwise, there's completely separated.
And it's mostly in Copenhagen, right?
Yes.
And you've exiled yourself as far as you can.
I've completely exiled myself from it.
You're way in the north.
I'm at the west coast of the North Sea. We're so far away from that place right now. We're on the west coast but I live in the dunes by the North Sea and far away from Copenhagen.
Sure.
But it's interesting that it's always nice to be at residencies like the one where we met with international writers, because actually hell was also the place that changed my luck.
That's
so there must be something in the water there.
Right. I mean, we should talk about that too, because this is one of my favorite stories of any writer that I know of, let alone actually know, which is you went from being a known but not especially best-selling writer in Denmark and exploded in the 4 months into some kind of international sensation, the Dorthe Nors syndrome.
The syndrome, which you're now suffering from.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, that is not a usual story in any way.
It's a really, really weird story. And when we met, I had just gotten a story accepted by the New Yorker. And I was the first Dane ever to have a story in there. And I knew it was big. But I had to look at Jarett to understand how big it was, because I asked ridiculous questions. I had no idea how for instance, I didn't know that they were paying me. And which you laughed at an entire evening. But the whole thing about having a story in the New Yorker, which was the last thing in a long line of work I had done in America, was a pretty crazy thing. I wrote the story collection that is right here, Karate Chop, and had a translator, and we translated it one by one, and he said, should we try and have it out in America? Well, just at least send the stories to magazines, and we started doing that. And I've never had a story rejected in America. And I always thought, that's an easy country. I mean, my self-esteem was not that big. I thought, they were going to take all kinds of crap people sent them. Well, here's some more. And everything I sent, they took. And then a little bit down the line, there was an American at this residency in Denmark called Fiona Marcel, who's also a writer. And we share things when you're at these residencies. So she saw some of these stories, and then she went home to Brooklyn. And when I came home from the residency, there was a mail from a public space, the magazine in Brooklyn, and asking me for stories. And I said, yes, of course. What I didn't know was that the editor of that place is a very powerful, she's like in the center of the whole Brooklyn community, you could say. Former head of Paris Review and stuff like that. So that was what sort of, and she had been introduced to my stories from Fiona Marcel, who took them to Brooklyn and gave it to her. And and that's just a crazy wonderful story because I just started out having fun. And I actually think that's a very important thing with writing. I mean, luck is important. It's also important to find some kind of enjoyment in what you do. That's hard, right?
Yeah.
No, but I mean, the first 3 books I wrote were not that fun writing. But then I kind of decided that no matter how bleak and black and dark and strange I write, it has to be a fun experience working with the material, at least, no matter what happens with it. And I think that spun off. I think nothing good started to happen in my writing until I decided to actually somewhat enjoy it. I mean, and not struggle so hard to be good at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I mean, I Hate the Internet is the only...
Which I love, by the way.
It's the only book I've done that was anything like fun. And
exactly. And also, books that are fun to write are not focused on perfection. They're just focused on presence. And things that are focused on presence has an energy in it that you can get away with a lot of stuff if you work with that.
Right.
And this is one of the reasons why I completely adore your book, is that it has such presence, and you can tell that it's written in
it completely absconds from any responsibility towards quality. So
that's not true.
But I mean, that was the idea behind writing it. Actually, was that anything that felt like it was something that I was doing because there had been an inherited language of literature, or a sense of like, well, if you do this crazy thing, you won't get published. I just did it, and it was enjoyable. And then, nothing has been fun about it since, because it did require an enormous amount of effort to get into the world. And then sort of when the world starts paying attention, which that is also not that fun. It's fun for about a month.
It's fun for about a month. Then you sort of divide your life up into, there's Dorthe, who's the assistant of this bitch who runs around in the world always talking into microphones, right? You sort of divide yourself into a public self and...
Well, and you really have a public self. You're on television.
In Sweden, but that's not...
My father actually saw one of the things that Dorthe did, which was extraordinarily nice, is she held up a very early copy of I Hate the Internet on Swedish television.
Yeah, the hottest book show in Sweden, in Scandinavia.
And my father was really impressed by that.
He saw that?
Yeah, he saw. Well, he just got he finally just got an Android phone, so now he's using the internet, which is great. It's really wonderful. But so he saw. So he of all of the things related to the book that he's looked at, that was the thing that impressed him the most. Was that, and he has no idea who you are because I tell him nothing. But he was like, yeah, I can't believe that someone in Scandinavia held up your book, and I was like, it's
someone in Scandinavia held up your book,
and he was impressed.
But did it help you? Did it sell to Sweden?
No.
Look.
No. It did impress my dad. That's about it. So, how do you think you're received as a writer?
Very generously in America.
But do you think that
and England and other places?
Do you think that being a woman limits your reception? Because I think it totally limits your reception.
I do think there's a bias there. I do even think my editor, Fiona McRae, asked me the other day in New York, do you think a woman could get away with writing My Struggle by Karl Ove Knausgård? And I said, no. She would be conceived as incredibly self-absorbed if she did that.
Yeah, I mean,
he's an intellectual.
That's right. No, I mean, it's particularly interesting to me because I have had this book come out and it's had this rapturous reception, and it's clear to me that the reception, at least in part, is based in my gender.
Had I written it, it would have been.
No, exactly. If you had written it, you just would have gotten shit and of all different kinds. And yet, I think when your work gets reviewed, which is not to say that this material isn't in the work, but I think there's an extreme focus on the places where women's literature is received, which is emotion and feeling.
Yeah.
But there's also, and this is the one part of it that I'll read, which struck me when I was rereading this, struck me as being...
Don't read my notes.
No, struck me as being particularly interesting, given that this is the day after Brexit, which...
Oh, yeah, that's horrible.
Which is... okay, so I apologize. This is awful to have someone else read your work in front of you. Minna gets the connection. Minna walks around among ordinary people. Ordinary people cheat on their taxes. Ordinary people go to swinger clubs. Ordinary people flee the scene of the crime. Ordinary people enlist in the Nordland Regiment of the SS. Ordinary people are quislings, collaborators, camp followers. Ordinary people just need a stage. The pig performs gladly. Cowards are in good supply, too. Minna doesn't get how she could have ignored it. Minna's clear-sighted enough. Minna's watched TV. Minna followed the war in the Balkans. Minna watched neighbors out each other to Serbian militias. One day you're tending cabbage together in the backyard. The next day you're on a bus headed for a mass grave. And I think...
That's the bleak side.
Well, what else would I fixate on?
You read it beautifully. Go on tour with me.
But I think, isn't there a way in which this incredibly dense section and this incredibly dense writing style is entirely about what is the issue of the moment?
Exactly, and it's rarely that... One of the things that bothers me about the way female writers, which is also a phrase, I actually hate the phrase female writers, but women who write are received, is that it is as if we're not supposed to have an intellectual outlook on what we do. It's as if we're not thinking about where we're going with our work. And of course we are. We're not in, it's not all emotions. We do have something we want to say about things. And also, sometimes when you get reviewed as a woman, there's a lot of sexist shit in the reviews. I mean, really sexist shit. And the first thing you learn as a writer is you never talk back at the reviewer, because the publishers go, don't, just don't do that. But boy, you want to do it sometimes. I mean, because it's really bad. And the only solution to that, Jarett, is stop reading the reviews.
The only reviews I read are the ones on Amazon and on Goodreads, because that's where the meanest people are. And actually, there's a UK edition of I Hate the Internet coming out in a couple of months, and I'm trying to convince them. They have a quote from the New York Times, which is very favorable, and I'm trying to convince them to put this random guy's quote on the front, which is like, this book is so completely terrible, so inept, so juvenile, so badly written that it doesn't even deserve the consideration or to be thought about. And I really...
Can you convince them? Are they convinced?
No, they're not. But if I had my way, that would be one of the selling points of the book. Because I find the reviews that you get from professional reviewers, I can't read those.
No.
But I do like sort of both the adulation and the contempt you get from normal readers.
I try to avoid both, I would say.
But no, I do think that your work has a deep intellectual strain in it, and I think it's interesting because, being from Denmark, you're also at something like the origin point of this moment that we're in, right? You have this far-right government, which precedes all the far-right triumph of 2016.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how in Minna you have this 6 lines or 7 lines. That's the origin of and the explanation of the moment that we're in.
Exactly, with all the rage and all the contempt and all the entire. It's like there's something cooking out there. I actually think it was you who said to me, there is something right now that makes people respond well to rage.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think I may have said that in the context of having a book with hate in the title, which was not what I was expecting. But no, actually, Bill Jones, who's sitting right in front of me, has this idea that what we are in is a countercultural revolution, but the revolution is indistinguishable to most people because our idea of what countercultural revolution is hippies or leftist anarchists, but what it actually is right now in this moment is coming from the right and coming from the far right. And Denmark certainly.
It's so bad. All the good stuff you were talking about with Denmark and the welfare system is being unraveled by radical right-winged dudes and dames right now.
Yeah,
and it's all over the place. It's sort of an infection in the Western world right now, or a backlash, or it's rage. But the flip side of rage, or the other side of rage, or maybe the origin of rage here is fear. I mean, and I must say this, I've been in America for 5 days, and I'm a lot in airports, and there's a lot of television in airports. And I understand why people who sit cooped up in living rooms with their blinds down and watch this get scared, and then why they get rage. And it feels completely stupid that we're sort of cooking up our own problem here. It's like a very, very bad wheel of destruction that I don't know how we're going to stop without nuking Denmark. I mean, there was somebody who said that about, I think it was another Republican candidate who wanted really much to be president himself, who said, we got to stop Trump or else he will nuke Denmark. When we've been awake ever since. I mean, that's scary, you know.
So should we open this up to audience questions? I think
yes,
we have.
Let's do that. I think we've.
Yeah, we're quite close. So does anyone have questions?
What are your other Bibles
besides ruining the scene?
Besides the Bergman memoir, what have your other Bibles been over the years?
She's asked me what other very important influence Bibles I've had. They've been Swedish. For instance, a Swedish writer called Kerstin Ekman meant a lot to me in my 20s. And she's also, I wrote my thesis on her.